Hi, this is Jen Rubin, and this is Jen Rubin's Green Room. So glad you're back. And just a reminder, if you like our programs, please tell your friends. They can follow and click right there, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Spotify, or wherever they get their podcasts. So it's Tuesday as we sit here, and Donald Trump has gone on the warpath, very predictably, against Judge Merchan, the jurors, the justice system, the state of New York, because, of course, Donald Trump can never lose. If he loses, it's rigged. If it loses, it's corrupt. And this is what he does. This is what he did in the 2020 election. This is what he will do if and when he loses in 2024. This is what he'll do after every adverse verdict. Because two things. One, he, of course, is a pathological narcissist who always has to be right. And secondly, this is what authoritarian bullies do. In order to seize power, in order to make sure that institutions bend to their will, they have to first destroy the credibility of them as they exist already. And this is right out of the strongman playbook. When Orban comes to power, when the Polish right-wing government comes to power, when South American dictators come to power, one of the first things they do after locking up journalists is to go after the independent courts. Why? Because that's the biggest impediment to executive power. You have courts out there that prevent them from doing things. And that's a no-no in the authoritarian playbook. So, of course, Trump is going to go after Merchan. He's going to go after jurors. And because he controls a party that is nothing but a bunch of mini-me's, they all echo that. So you now have an entire political party that is attacking the rule of law, that is attacking a judge, that is attacking a jury, that is attacking the concept that a prosecutor can bring a case successfully against a former president of the United States. That is immensely damaging to our justice system, which depends upon respect for the rule of law and acceptance of outcomes, whether you like them or not. And I think it's another one of these inflection points. Are we going to let someone run for office, potentially gain office, and the office being the chief executive, the guy who is supposed to enforce the laws, when that person has so little regard for the rule of law, when he will not accept outcomes that don't favor him? And that's another one of the gobsmacking ironies of this election, that you're having to choose between one guy who more or less does his job, who enforces the law, who believes in the rule of law, and one guy who already has shown he's completely unwilling to uphold his oath, that he will not abide by the peaceful transfer of power. He will not abide by court decisions that don't favor him. So, if nothing else, the election itself, the whole campaign he is running, is disqualifying to Donald Trump. But of course, a great many people don't see it that way. And he has convinced an entire party that democracy is a sham, these institutions are a sham, and the only way to protect them and prevent the downfall of Western civilization from these hated elites, these foreigners, is to elect him. And that's where we are today. Now, do I think that's going to be successful? I pray it will not. But the fact that it's even possible tells you that we have reached a pretty low point in American democracy. So what else is going on? Well, the president unveiled an executive order on the border that essentially says if you cross the border illegally, you can't apply for asylum. Now, the obvious problem here is this has been tried before and the courts have struck it down. Not because it's inherently a bad idea or an unfair idea, but because we have immigration laws that don't allow that say the opposite, that say you have a right to claim asylum if you're in here illegally, if you're being deported, if you're being deported through a full proceeding, through an abbreviated proceeding, that you have the right to raise an immunity and a asylum claim, rather. And They've tried this. Donald Trump tried this. The courts rejected it. So why is President Biden doing this? He's doing it to make a point. He began negotiations, if you recall, with then Speaker McCarthy back in the fall when he was balking, McCarthy was, about keeping the government running if we didn't first deal with the border. He continued to negotiate until he got booted out. And then the White House said, okay, we'll go negotiate with the Senate. Because at that point, the Senate was refusing to give aid to Israel, to Ukraine, and to Taiwan without a tough border provision. So what did they do? They negotiated a tough border position. And in fact, it was negotiated by James Langford, who was a pretty hard right-winger. Donald Trump stood up and said, oh, no, we can't let Donald Trump have a president to run against who has actually fixed a problem. We have to have a problem. So he told them all to vote against it. And like good little marionettes, they voted against it. This came up just a week ago again when Chuck Schumer put this same measure back on the Senate floor. And of course, the Republicans filibustered it. So Biden now goes to the country and says, what do you want me to do? I've tried everything. I'll throw a Hail Mary. I'll throw this possible avenue of securing the border. And the Republicans say, oh, you should have done this earlier. What? When he was negotiating with them? You should have done this through Congress? He's been trying to do it through Congress. So he's making a pretty powerful argument that these guys are hypocrisy personified. That if they want to make the border a top issue, and frankly, it is an issue. I wouldn't say as much of a deal as the Republicans say, but let's grant them that it's an important issue. We want to control our borders. But you can't then at every turn prevent a solution because you want the other guy to look bad. So that's essentially what Biden is saying. And he's making a larger point here too. And that is, you do not want to go back to the agent of chaos. This guy wants things to be a mess. I want to solve problems. He wants the mess. And that's a somewhat powerful argument in a country that really would just like the government to operate with some modicum of sanity and competence. So we'll see what comes of that. I suspect it will be challenged immediately in court. Perhaps it will be struck down. And then Biden this summer will go back to Congress and say, you want to try it again. And we'll see if Republicans during the long, hot summer of Washington, D.C., just months before an election, actually want to filibuster again in solution to our border problem. We'll see. Lastly, the Middle East continues. Last Friday, President Biden did something very interesting. He put out a proposal for an immediate ceasefire and then a permanent ceasefire, a stepped procedure to essentially end the war. He did this for a couple reasons. One, he did it to show the American people, and particularly his critics on the left, I want to solve this problem. You want a ceasefire? I want a ceasefire. I don't know why you guys are continuing to criticize me. I'm doing whatever I possibly can. You think I want the war to go on? Of course I don't want the war to go on. So he's answering some of his domestic critics. He's also forcing the Israelis' hand, and to a large degree, he's gotten away with it, that they have to say, okay, we're ready. This is acceptable to us. We'll take the deal. That yes, Bibi talks about fighting forever. Yes, he talks about having to completely destroy the Hamas contingent in Gaza. But yes, this is generally acceptable to us. Now, some of his coalition partners won't go along with it, but if push came to shove and he supported it, the opposition parties would support it as well. And so what this does, this reminds people, you know what the problem is? It's Hamas. It's the people who murdered 1,200 innocents and took a couple hundred people back to Gaza, who has killed about a third of them and won't give them back. That's the problem. The problem is not President Biden. The problem is not solely, at least, the Israelis. The problem is Hamas. Go protest them. Go tell them that they have a moral obligation to stop the killing. And that's where we return to. It's not a pleasant dilemma for Americans not to have someone convenient to blame, particularly when they want to blame that side all along. But the reality is, this is Hamas's doing. And until there's sufficient pressure on Hamas, sufficient enticement for them to make a deal, probably meaning that the high-level leaders leave with essentially their sidearms, they're going to keep going on. And they're going to keep pushing the Israelis, and the Israelis are going to keep pushing back, and a lot of innocent people are going to be killed. So I don't know that this is a solution to the war, but I think in some respects it was a long overdue recalibration by the White House to say, this war was not a war of our choosing or of Israel's choosing. It's gone on too long. We do have a solution, and now Hamas, what are you going to do about it? And so in that respect, I think it was a pretty effective political and strategic message. Now, I'll end on this. This week is the 80th anniversary of D-Day. And whenever you look at those grainy films or you watch Saving Private Ryan, it does take your breath away. The sheer courage of those men racing through the water, racing up against those hills, to be shot at, to be bombed at, to be struck down by the German forces. The courage is simply breathtaking. And they did it. Some of them did it just out of a sense of sheer survival. Some of them did it to save their buddies. Some of them did it because they knew they were facing evil incarnate, and that it was either them or evil, and they were not going to allow evil to reign. But whatever their motivation, they acted with such selfishness, such bravery, such a sense of obligation that it should shame every American who doesn't bother to vote, who doesn't bother to get informed, who checks out of the political process. If those young men could die by the hundreds and the thousands to maintain our democracy, the least we can all do is try to uphold it. The least we can all do is work to prevent it from falling into the 21st century fascists' hands. And that guy is Donald Trump. No one's asking you to storm the beach. No one's asking you to give your life. They're just asking you to get out there and participate in the political process so that those men's sacrifices mean something. And there you have it. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we'll see you back next time. Bye-bye.